Welcome back to the channel, you curd nerds. Today, we're going to be talking about IFR cross-country navigation, and we're going to do this with a little twist. We're only going to use ground-based navigation aids. So you might be wondering, Cheese Pilot, why are we only using ground-based navigation aids? Doesn't everybody have GPS nowadays? Not really. And the reason not everyone has GPS is cost. This GI 175 or Garmin 175 that I've got right here is $5,200. And that's not including install labor. That's not including the wiring. That's not including the GPS antenna. That's not including a CDI to pair to it like a G5. That's not including any of it. That is just the GPS module is $5,200. Once you include all of that stuff, you can expect to drop around 20 grand. Now, if you're just trying to buy a Cessna 150 or a 172, but you want to make it IFR capable, that seems like a pretty steep bill. But a lot of those airplanes are already equipped with dual VORs with like Narco 12Ds or KX 155s that also have ILSs. So why should we limit ourselves to only knowing how to do GPS navigation when it's very possible for us to be completely IFR capable with only swinging needles and steam gauges? So let's get into how to plan across country. We're also going to include SIDS and STARS, two things that we haven't talked about on this channel before. So grab your cheese curds or whatever other snacks you like in case you're lactose intolerant, and let's get into the planning. All right, first off, we're going to talk about how to leave an airport under IFR or instrument flight rules, not necessarily IMC or instrument meteorological conditions, but just IFR. So we've got 4 ways that we can leave an airport under IFR. There's departure procedures, which are broken down into ODPs or obstacle departure procedures and SIDS or standard instrument departures. And then we also have diverse vector areas or diverse departure procedures. This is pretty much just ATC providing you vectors in the event that there isn't a departure procedure published and there are no obstacles within 250 feet per nautical mile up to the minimum IFR altitude. So for example, if there's no departure procedure published outside of the airport that you're coming from, and the minimum en route altitude is 5,000 feet, there needs to ensure that there are no obstacles within a 250 feet per nautical mile climb gradient up to that 5,000 feet. And then there is a VCOA, or a visual climb over airport. A visual climb over the airport is exactly what it sounds like. You need to be able to climb over the airport in visual conditions up to the minimum en route altitude or the minimum IFR altitude that's appropriate for your situation. Now, let's break down the departure procedures, the ODPs and the SIDS. First, we'll talk about ODPs. If we look right here, we have the Riverside to departure, and I know it's an obstacle departure because it says it right there. It's an obstacle departure. We could see the takeoff obstacle notes, which tells us what terrain is associated with what runways. And then we also have takeoff minimums. We've got like runway 9, it's standard with a minimum climb gradient of 310. Now you might be wondering, how do I know if I can maintain that 310 feet per nautical mile climb gradient? How do I convert feet per nautical miles to feet per minute, which is displayed to me in my aircraft? Well, we've got a quick little rule of thumb kind of math. We take our feet per nautical mile, we multiply it by our ground speed and divide it by 60. And that should give us the feet per minute required to maintain the feet per nautical mile. So let's try this one out, for example. We've got 310 feet per nautical mile. So I'm going to open up my calculator on my CX3, and I'm going to type in 310 times my ground speed. Let's pretend that we're doing 80 knot ground speed. So 310 with an 80 knot ground speed. And then we're going to divide that answer by 60, which gives us a 413 feet per minute. That's pretty reasonable. Even for a Cessna 172, a 413 feet per minute climb is pretty reasonable. But of course, always reference your pilot's operating handbook and your performance section in that POH to verify that you can actually maintain that climb gradient. Because if you can't, then you're very likely risking a controlled flight into terrain incident or a CFIT incident. And that's obviously the last thing we want in IFR conditions. Next, we'll talk about is SIDs, or Standard Instrument Departure Procedures. All right, next thing we're going to talk about is a SID, or a Standard Instrument Departure. Now, Standard Instrument Departures are broken down into 3 categories. We have non-RNAV procedures, which are intended for aircraft that just don't have RNAV. Think things that only have VORs, or have VORs and NDBs, ADFs, things without GPS, things without an FMS, things without an IRU or an IRS. Think like your Cessna 172 that just has 2 KX 155s or Narco 12Ds. This would be a perfect example of a non-RNAV aircraft, or an aircraft that would need to do a non-RNAV SID, or Standard Instrument Departure. Then we have our RNAV departure procedures. Exactly what it sounds like. Departure procedures available to RNAV-only aircraft. This includes things like GPS, DME, VOR, DME, IRU, IRSs, something that has an FMS that can bring in all navigation sources from the area and provide you your location. We have a video covering RNAV right here if you want to go learn about that. And then we have radar departure procedures. These ones require radar. These ones require you to be able to be seen by ATC on radar to provide you guidance to the rest of the departure procedure. Think there's an O'Hare 8 is a perfect example of a radar departure. It's just climb to 3,000 by 5 miles or 5,000 by 8 miles, something like that. And ATC is telling you which heading to go to get you to your en route structure. But let's take a look at a RNAV departure procedure that we've got right here. If you want to follow along at home, it's at the Brownfield Municipal, or Kilo Sierra Delta Mike, and it is the Coward to departure. And you know it's RNAV because it just straight up says RNAV in the title. Always make sure you take a look at all notes associated with the departure procedure before you accept it, before you plan for it. So we can see right here, radar is required. Can we be picked up on radar? Are we flying a stealth bomber? Are we flying a stealth aircraft that can't be seen on radar? Probably not. So we probably have radar coverage. But do we also have a transponder that can give the appropriate data on radar coverage as well? Do we have a Mode C transponder? Then it says RNAV 1. That means we need to have an RNAV system that's capable of maintaining at least 1 mile accuracy. We need to ensure that that route that's being presented to us can guarantee that our position that it's calculating is within 1 mile of the actual position of the aircraft. Then it also says GPS can be used as that RNAV requirement, but also DME, or IRU is required. Then right there, it says turbojet or turboprop only, meaning us and our Cessna 172 cannot do this departure procedure. Just says we're not fast enough. We can't climb fast enough. It's not available to us. But let's take a look at it just to, I guess, brief it. See what we can understand about it. Let's pretend that we are capable of accomplishing this. So right here, we've got takeoff minimums. Let's pretend that we're taking off of 8 left. So we've got standard takeoff minimums with a climb of 570 feet per nautical mile up to 3,100. So we can do our quick little math. 570 times 80 divided by 60 says we need to maintain 760 feet per minute. So our takeoff minimums say that we need to maintain a 760 foot per minute climb up to 3,100. If we're taking off at 8 left, it's a climbing left turn to a heading of 280 to 290 to altitude of 2,900. Expect vectors to cross Gwyn at or above 6,000, then on track of 308 to Pad Riz, then on track 337 to cross Coward at or below 12,000. Thence on transition, maintain ATC assigned altitude, expect filed altitude 10 minutes after departure. And that's about it. And that is a standard instrument departure. So this is how we get out of the airport area. This is how we get from the terminal, from the airport into our en route structure. An example or a simile that people use to compare SIDs and ODPs is think of a SID as the roads that take you from your neighborhood to the highway on your way to work. And then the highway is your en-route structure. And then when we can look at the off-ramp as like our star or a standard terminal arrival. And then the parking lot and driveway or what have you could be viewed as our approach segment. And then when we're finally actually parked, we could think of that as like the taxi or what have you. So next thing we're going to talk about is stars or standard terminal arrivals. All right, now that we know how to leave our airport and get into our destination, let's actually build a plan. Let's build an IFR route between STP and Oshkosh. All right, so if you want to follow along at home, it's Kilo Sierra Tango Papa to Kilo Oscar Sierra Hotel. Now, I've already got a route that I have built for this, but let's talk through it. Let's talk about my planning process. What I like to do when I build an IFR flight is I like to figure out how I'm getting into my destination, then how am I leaving my airport of departure, and then I fill the middle. Then I fill the route with a route that would connect those two things. Okay, so let's look at Oshkosh first. Oshkosh, I don't believe it has much in the way of arrivals. You know, we just have alternate minimums in the event that we wanted to use Oshkosh as an alternate, but there are no arrivals. So we're not going to worry about that. But what we can do is look at the weather and decide on what runway we might want to plan for. So currently it's being forecast wind 200 at 13, gusting 27. And in the TAF, it looks like it's going to stay pretty lined up with runway 20. Runway 18. So we're going to plan on runway 18. So let's go ahead and head to procedures. Now I've got a localizer back course runway 18. Sure, that might be an option. But remember, back courses, they reverse sense. Sure, in your G1000 and whatnot, they don't reverse sense, but this one does. And it takes us down to 1,240. But we have to be wary of the fact that we've got that reverse sensing going on. So I don't really like back courses, especially given that the weather that we saw doesn't show us that we're going to need an approach that can get us down low. So we've also got the VOR runway 18, which takes us down to 1,480 with 1 mile visibility. I like that one better. If I'm just going to be honest, if I'm just going to be frank about it, so that I don't have to deal with the reverse sensing. My weather shows me that I can get down below this weather, below this low visibility, below these clouds, below this obscuration with just a VOR where I don't have to deal with a back course reverse sensing. So we're going to plan on the VOR runway 8. So let's head back to the map, head up to our flight plan, and then we're going to select procedures. Then we're going to select approach, and then we're going to select the VOR runway 8. Via the Oshkosh VOR. It's already added to our route. So let's go ahead and close that. Discard route change. And now we're going to talk about how we're leaving STP. So Sierra Tango Papa does have departure procedures that our aircraft is capable of doing. So let's go ahead and head to procedures, correction. We're going to go up to flight plan and we're going to select procedures. And we're going to select departure from STP. I currently have the Colt 7 selected. And the reason I have the Colt 7 selected is because it's really the only one that gets me pointed in the right direction. Sure, I might be able to do the Wilston 7, but that takes me way up into northern Wisconsin. And I'm just trying to go to Oshkosh. Looks like this one is really, the Colt 7 kind of puts us more in the right direction. At this point, it's kind of a horse apiece. So we're just going to plan on the Colt 7. Now, let's go ahead and actually look at that departure procedure so that we can figure out where are we going to get on, where are we going to get off of this departure procedure. Looks like we've got some takeoff minimums. Runway 9, let's say we're planning on runway 9. It's going to be a standard climb of 340 feet per nautical mile up to 1,300. Now, based on my rule of thumb, where it's foot per nautical miles times my ground speed divided by 60, I have a foot per minute that I need to maintain of around 460 feet. We'll just round that up to 500 just to make it safe. So 500 feet per minute up to 1,300. most general aviation aircraft are capable of that. Cessna 152 fully loaded down with only a 100 horsepower engine might struggle with that, but a 172, a Cherokee 250 that we're going to be using for this lesson is going to be more than capable of 500 foot per minute climb up to 1,300. But of course, always reference your POH and your feet per minute chart based on the current conditions to make sure that you can actually maintain that climb gradient. Let's go look at the actual text description of this. So if we're taking off of runway 9, we're going to climb on a heading of 091 to 1,400 for radar vectors to intercept the radial 119 from the GEP VOR, and we're going to take that to the Colt intersection, which is 61 DME, and then from that, we're going to go on a transition. Let's look at the transitions. Looks like we've really only got the one transition, the DLL transition, but that pushes us way up to 9,000 feet. That's a pretty high minimum en route altitude. I don't know if I really want to climb all the way up there just for a trip to Oshkosh, but it's an option. If you would prefer to do that, sure, go ahead and climb up to 9,000 feet. I don't think that that's worth it. What I think we can do is get on to our en route structure from the Colt intersection. So the Colt intersection is right there. And that Colt intersection is right next to this Fasto intersection as well, which is 118 DME from the DLL VOR 296 radial, but it's also 122 radial at 65 DME from the GEP VOR. So I'm pretty confident that I can identify that. And I can also look at my nav log, which gives me a heading to take to Fasto of 164. So I've got a plan. From there, I want to join the Victor 2 at Troll. So again, I've got a heading of 160 from Fasto to Troll, which is the Victor 2, which again, it's coming from the ODI VOR at 3,400 is my minimum en route altitude. So it's keeping me low. I don't have to climb a lot. It keeps me out of any kind of weather that might be up higher. Keeps me out of the icing conditions that might be up higher too, especially here in the Midwest. The higher you climb, the colder it gets. When you got visible moisture and it's freezing temperatures, you're in ice. So let's stay low during our IFR flight, given that we don't have a whole lot of obstacles to avoid to keep us out of those icing conditions. So from ODI, looks like we're going to take the Victor 82 at, again, a minimum en route altitude of 3,000. That Victor 82 is going to take us to the DLL VOR. And then from the DLL VOR, we're going to take Victor 170, again at 3,000 feet, to the Victor 9 from Rando, which takes us to the Oshkosh VOR, which is our initial approach fix for our VOR runway 18 into Oshkosh. Now, that's a pretty straightforward route, not a whole lot of complications, but we need to talk about if we need an alternate or another possible destination in the event that we can't get into Oshkosh. So we'll talk about alternates next. All right, now alternates. Alternates are airports that you are planning on going to in the event that you can't get into your destination for one reason or another, whether it be fuel, whether it be delays, whether it be holding, whether it be weather. Now, a lot of the ways people teach alternates is that you always need an alternate unless the following conditions are met. And you can read these conditions in Federal Aviation Regulation 91-169. We're going to break it down a little bit Barney style for you, but I still recommend you go and check that regulation out. The rule is, it's the 1-2-3 rule is the way that people remember it. So first off, your airport has to have an approach that's available to your aircraft. So if your aircraft only has dual VORs, you can't plan on an ILS. Right? You can't plan on an RNAV. You can't plan on a GPS. If your aircraft has all that equipment, then you can use those. So obviously, your airport has an approach that you can do. So we've met that first condition. Now, the next one is for at least 1 hour before or 1 hour after your estimated time of arrival, you've got a ceiling of at least 2,000 feet with 3-mile visibility. Now, let's hop back in to ForeFlight and look at the weather at our destination. So we've got Oshkosh right here. That's the Oshkosh VOR. I want the Oshkosh Airport. And we'll go full screen just so that we could see the weather just a little bit better. Now, currently, the METAR is showing VFR. It's 8-mile visibility, few at 4,300, broken at 5,000, overcast at 6,000 with light rain. It's not great weather, but it's VFR weather. Let's look at the TAF, or our forecast. So we're planning on getting there around 5 o'clock. Based on, this simulation, we're planning on getting there around 5 o'clock. So currently at 4 o'clock, it's forecast to be 6-mile visibility, scattered at 1,000, broken at 2,500. Then we've got, again, at 4 p.m., this was an adjustment, 4-mile visibility, broken at 1,500. This is a temporary, and it expires at 6. So there it is. There's our indication that we need an alternate. Now, when it comes to an alternate, how do we pick one? Now, alternates, they need to have certain conditions met. The airport has to have an approach, and if it doesn't have an approach, I need to be able to get from my en-route structure down to the airport in VFR, VMC conditions. This doesn't mean that the airport needs to be VFR. I mean, the airport obviously at the very least needs to be VFR, but I need to be able to get from my en-route structure down to the airport. I pretty much need to be visual the entire way. But if the airport does have an approach, we have a couple different requirements. So if there's a precision approach available to our aircraft, the ceiling needs to be at least 600 feet and 2 statute mile visibility to be forecast. And if there's only non-precisions available to our aircraft, we're looking at 800-foot ceilings and 2-mile visibility. All right, now I did almost forget. This is only in reference to standard alternate minimums. So the regulation that covers alternate minimums has these two references: precision, non-precision, 602, 802. But if we look at an approach plate and we actually see a little A that looks like this up in the notes section, that approach has alternate minimums for when you're using that airport as an alternate, or when you plan on using that approach as an alternate. So let's take a look at the Fond du Lac Airport, which is what we're going to end up using as our alternate. And we can see that the VOR DME runway 18 is not authorized when local weather is not available. Category D has 802 1/4. So if we can't pick up the weather at Fond du Lac, we can't use this airport as our alternate, given that the only thing that's available to the aircraft that we're simulating in this scenario is VORs. So we would need to go to the NOTAMs associated with the Fond du Lac Airport and just verify that we don't see anything in the NOTAMs saying that the ATIS would be out of service. I can see that it's reporting weather right now. So we should be able to use this. We should be good, but just make sure that if you are planning on an alternate, which you should in most cases, that if it does have alternate minimums, your aircraft is capable of complying with those alternate minimums. Let's get back into the main video. Now, let's hop back into ForeFlight and see if we can find an alternate that works for us. So we're going to Oshkosh. So obviously I don't want to go too far. So let's look at Appleton. Appleton's not very far. We should be able to get there no problem. Now, Appleton, let's go to procedures. Let's go to approaches. We'll go to full screen so we can see a little better. Let's go procedures and approaches. I'm seeing 210 at 15. So we're planning again for a runway that kind of lines up with 210. Now, it looks like the only approaches that really line up for 210 are RNAV approaches. There's an ILS, but with a 15-knot crosswind, I don't know if I really want to plan on that being my alternate and a 15-knot crosswind. So Appleton's out of the books. Let's go and take a look at Green Bay now. We'll go to Green Bay, procedures, approaches, and looks like we've got a localizer back course 24, RNAV, RNAV, RNAV. Looks like Green Bay is not really an option. Let's go see if Fond du Lac would be an option. There's Madison. Yeah, Fond du Lac's right there. So Fond du Lac's kind of along our way. So that might be a better alternate for us. We'll go full screen. Weather, I'm showing VFR weather. Then let's go approach. Looks like 200 at 11 and VOR runway 18. So non-precision approach. We've got the weather that we need. It's a non-precision, so we need at least 800-foot ceilings and 2-mile visibility. It's currently being forecast, or it's currently VFR in Fond du Lac, and we will probably be able to accomplish this approach. It even starts from the Oshkosh VOR, so if we end up having to go missed, or if there's for some reason we can't get into Oshkosh, this will be a pretty easy alternate. Now, let's take a look at the full weather and the forecast, just to be sure. So IFR, light rain showers, 2-mile visibility, overcast 1500. So we're still good, still good. Overcast 800. That is minimum. All right. So it looks like Fond du Lac will be okay. It's kind of cutting it close, but Fond du Lac is going to be our alternate. Now that we've got our departure, our destination, our departure procedure, our approach that we're planning on, our entire en-route structure, and we know what airport we're planning on for an alternate, how do we file all of this? How do we get it into ForeFlight and make sure that ATC sees it and we file this appropriately so that we can get the appropriate guidance along the way? That's what we're going to talk about next. All right, now how do we file all of this in ForeFlight? How do we get a weather briefing? How do we finalize this before we go and hop in the airplane? Well, let's hop back into ForeFlight and make sure that everything looks correct. We've got our departure of STP via the Colt 7, Colt, FASDO, Troll, Victor 2, ODI, Victor 82, DLL, Victor 170, Rando, Victor 9, Oshkosh, Oshkosh VOR runway 8 into the Oshkosh airport. And we're planning on Fond du Lac as our alternate. So what I like to do, hit that little pack button. What this does is it downloads everything to your iPad so that your iPad, if it loses signal, it still has all of this stuff. It still has the comments. It still has the airmets, the sigmets, and the NOTAMs, the TFRs, the fuel prices, etc. Right? Let's pack that last little bit. Don't know why it didn't download. Okay, score. Then what we're going to do is we're going to press that little box that's with an arrow pointing up. This way, we can share this to other people. We can share it like via the passenger thing. We can print it if we wanted to have paper ones. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to send it to flights. And that brings me to this window, which shows me things like my nav log. And this is another thing that I could print out. I generally recommend you print it out in the event that, you know, your iPad dies or something like that. Then we can click and get a weather briefing. Now, when we get a weather briefing this way, this is an official weather briefing. This is as part of that regulation 91103, the NW Craft acronym. This counts. Okay, so it's showing us our en-route structure and any kind of winds that are associated with it. It's also showing some winds aloft. We can see some rotation right there. So that's kind of where this bad weather's coming from. We can see any kind of significant weather and the jet streams. So there's our jet streams up high. Then we've got our METARs and TAFs. We've kind of already gone through all of this as part of our planning, as part of, you know, looking at the weather in the full screen and the map. So we're just kind of perusing through, making sure we're not seeing anything jumping out at us that would cause for concern. Looks like there might be a convective sigmet that's covering our area. Again, we've kind of seen that in the forecast. You know, personally, I don't think I'd really do this in real life, but just to kind of show you an IFR flight, we're going to do it anyway. But I definitely wouldn't do this in real life. I don't want to get caught in a thunderstorm. Then we've got more NOTAMs. These are things like runway closures, obstructions, standard instrument departure. It looks like the FOW VOR is out of service. We don't plan on using the FOW VOR. You can see it right there. Looks like the SHEP 1 departure, the Zembo departure. Yep. So looks like those aren't available. Approach procedures. Doesn't look like any of that's going to apply to us. Then we've got Oshkosh. We've got obstructions. Instrument approaches. VOR 9 doesn't apply to us. RNAV, not important. Then we got a couple ILSs that are out of service. And yeah, other than that, I think I don't think there's anything else for us to worry about. So estimated time of departure, we'll plan on saying we're departing around 4 o'clock today. And let's put our alternate of FDL. Add to the airport. We've got our aircraft performance profile. And this is kind of another show of our route, showing any kind of weather that we might be coming in and out of. Looks like it's a bunch of green rain. Airplane's not made out of sugar. There is that little bit right there that was showing a little bit of orange. Where'd it go? So it looks like there might be a little bit of storm that's about to hit Oshkosh, but it should be passed by the time we get there. Cruise altitude 5,000. I'm not filing any FBO. And we would proceed to file. Now, I'm not going to file this flight plan because the tail number I put in here isn't my aircraft. So I'm not going to file it. I just put it in here to get a performance profile. Plus, we don't even actually have the plan of actually doing this route. But let's make sure we've got, at the very least, enough gas. We need to have enough gas to get to our destination and then to our alternate, and then another 45 minutes at cruise. Now, this aircraft burns about 14 gallons per hour. Our ETA, or our en route estimated time en route, is 1 hour and 20 minutes. And then it should take us another 30 minutes to get to Fond du Lac in the event that we need to. So we need, at the very least, not counting our 45-minute reserve, we're looking at 28 gallons. Then we add another 45 minutes on that, another estimated 10 gallons. We're looking at we're looking at 38 gallons in this aircraft. Now, if you're not worried about being overweight, just fill it. Just fill it. You might have to divert around some weather. You might have to go to a different alternate if the weather changes. Just fill the airplane if you don't have to worry about, being out of weight and balance, of course. So without further ado, let's hop into Microsoft Flight Sim and actually fly this procedure. All right, and here we are hopping into Microsoft Flight Sim. This is our Comanche 250. Look at this thing. It's actually pretty snazzy. It's by A2A, so if you did want it, that's how you can go get it. No sponsorship or anything like that. I just think it's a cool little modification for Microsoft Flight Sim, especially this little iPad that lets you do so much more. We'll go ahead and get rid of the wheel chocks, the tie downs, the pitot cover, and that's all we should really need to do. I think the only other thing I like to do with this one is I change out the propeller for the MT propeller. I guess it doesn't really matter. So we're going to be doing an IFR flight from STP, which is where we're currently parked at, to Oshkosh. I've tried to load it in as close to accurate weather as possible, just so that we can actually do this route. And here's the iPad showing where we are parked at STP and our whole route as well. Now, one of the things with IFR flying is you can file it all day. ATC can still change it. Okay. ATC, when you go and call for your clearance, they can still change what your clearance is. So I like to have a little scratch pad up that has my craft clearance, or like my little craft fill in or whatever you want to call it, available, so that when ATC gives me a different clearance, or if they give me a different clearance, I've got it there. But what does CRAFT stand for? So CRAFT is your clearance limit for C. It is your route. How are you going to get from where you are to where you want to be? The altitude. What is your initial altitude and what is your assigned altitude? What are you going to expect later? Then the frequencies, so like what's your departure frequency, and then your transponder code. What are you going to squawk? What are you going to put in your transponder to let ATC be able to identify you? So let's get this airplane all started up and ready to go. And of course, we're going to do that with a checklist, mainly because this thing is actually kind of a hassle to start. So you want to make sure you actually follow this thing appropriately. So we're going to go flight info checklist. We already did our pre-flight. Let's go to our engine start checklist. So we got fuel selector, desired tank. Let's go ahead and switch it all to the main tanks right there. Then we've got mixture rich. Let's make sure mixture, that's my propeller, mixture rich, throttle just a smidge in. And finally, what is it? Is it master switch? Nope. Carb heat, we checked. Master switch on. And then I believe the next thing is fuel pump on. I hear the fuel pump, and then primer 1 to 5. We'll go with 3. It doesn't seem like it's a very hot or very cold day. All right. Fuel pressure is checked. Primers good. Magnetos both. And propeller area clear. I remain clear of my propeller. I know. I'm home alone. Whatever. Leave me alone. And then we're going to go ahead and get this thing running. Come on. There we go. And starters off. Oil pressure is in the green. Temperature's coming up. We got good fuel pressure. And lean as required. So we're going to take this on up to 1200 RPM. We're going to bring this mixture back until we get about a 50 RPM rise. All right, I saw a drop in RPM. Looks like we're only going to get about 20 or so RPM. Then we're going to bring it back to 1000 and avionics on. Let everything boot up. We've got a taxi checklist next. And let's make sure that primer got locked. It sure is. Avionics masters on. Ammeter is showing positive. Radios, make sure we get those turned on. And transponder as required. We're going to set that to altitude. Actually, we'll leave it at on right now because we're technically not in the air. Heading indicator, let's match it up to our compass. Our compass says 30. So let's go ahead and set our heading indicator. That's our needle. Oh, there we go. Let's go ahead and set this 30 so that it's squared away. And there it is. Yeah, that's pretty close. Then altimeter, let's get our local ATIS. So over to our iPad, airports, STP, meter, or STP ATIS is 11835. So we'll hold COM 11835, enter, and switch it over to active.
Information and go to 000 50 at 8. Visibility 10. Sky conditions. Clouds at 1,600 feet, 4,400 feet on the cat. Temperature 7. Dew point 10. I'll get a back to you guys. That's all 75.
2975. 2975. All right. See. There we go. And 2975 is set. My altimeter is matching field elevation. I'm happy with that. Heading indicator set. Altimeter set. Landing gear lamp is green. Nav lights as required. Rotating beacon. Oh, which one of these? That's my pitot heat. That's my strobe. That's my instrument lighting. Those are my landing lights. There's my rotating beacon. Let's go ahead and turn off my landing lights and strobe. Awesome. Next is going to be parking brake release, test brakes. We're not going to do that just yet because we are going to call for a departure clearance. So let's go ahead and on our iPad, we see that we have 121,675. So 121,675, enter, and enter. Switch that over. And we do have to open up the ATC menu so that we can request our clearance.
St. Paul clearance delivery cheese 1 IFR to Oshkosh, ready to copy.
Compound on United Climb, maintaining 9,000 feet. Departure frequency gets not on this part 5.
All right, awesome. Cleared as filed. Up to 9, 121.2, and 3365. We can read that back.
1, cleared to Oshkosh Airport as filed. Take off runway 9 or climb and maintain 9,000 feet. Departure on 121.2 squawk tree 65.
Solid.
Solid, back to the connect. 121.675. When you ready to deck?
Oh, we're already on 121.675. Awesome. Well, I think we're ready to go. I think we are all squared away. Well, actually, let's set up our nav radios. So our departure, right? If we go over and look at our plates, departure, it looks like we're going to be doing the Gopher, or we're going to be using the Gopher VOR or the GEP VOR. So I need to put that in my COM 1. So that's 1173, enter. And put that up to COM 1. Or nav 1, I apologize. And it looks like we're going to be tracking the 191 radial or 119 radial outbound. So let's go ahead and set the 119. Oh, we're almost there. So there's 20. That should be 119. Or that was 120. That should be 119. That's a course that's going to take us away. I apologize. If we're going away, we need to set up we need to have a from indication. So there's my from indication. And there should be 120. That's 119. And then we're going to identify a couple fixes with the Eclair VOR. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the Eclair VOR in nav 2, which is 113.65. Enter. And, oh, that's 11364. I fat fingered that. There we go, 11365. Then it looks like my first radial that I need to identify is going to be the 251 radial. So let's go ahead and set that one in. That is not a COM 2. That is not a nav 2. That is an ADF. Looks like we are going to be doing this with a single swinging needle. This is going to be difficult. We got DME over here. So I think what we should do is switch it over to distance because I don't need to know what frequency I'm on. So I'm currently 18.3 DME from the Gopher VOR, and it looks like my first fix should be 46 DME. Then I got 61 DME, and then we're going to make sure we can get climbing on up to 9,000 before we cross Colt. And it looks like it's going to be 80 DME that's going to identify Lamprey, and then Dells is going to, and then we'll identify the Dells VOR from Lamprey. Now, I know we filed something a little differently earlier. Microsoft Flight Sim, for some reason, just didn't like the route that I filed. So the route that we're actually going to take is going to be the Colt 7 all the way on to the Dells VOR. And then we're going to go Dells VOR via the I think it's Rando. And from then on, it's pretty much we're going to take the Colt 7 all the way to Dells and then follow on as we originally filed. All right. I think we're all squared away and ready for taxi. Let's go ahead and request taxi.
St. Paul ground cheese 1 with Echo ready to taxi IFR.
Call a taxi to a cost center. I'm a dialer. Using that and we cross the That is 3 Bravo cross route. Is that Bravo? On 119 to moment.
All right. Taxi and hold short of runway 9 using taxiway. I don't know what taxiway, so let's just go back to our chart and see what it might be. I don't know why they're having me cross a runway. Looks like I should just be able to go this way. Oh. Knowledge taxi clearance.
Taxi hold short runway 9er via taxiway. Charlie Alpha cross runway 9er Alpha cross runway 27 Bravo cheese what?
Oh, okay. Taxi hold short runway. All right, I see. I read that wrong. Charlie Alpha. And again, why are they having me cross the runway? Charlie Alpha? That doesn't make any sense. Because we're taking off. It told me to. Taxi and hold short of runway 9 via Charlie and then Alpha. That doesn't make any sense. Because that's not how you get to runway 9. This is how you get to runway 9. Oh, I love Microsoft Flight Sim. Hopefully in 2024, Microsoft Flight Sim 2024, the ATC is better. I just don't feel like paying for say intentions or any of those AI based ones. And also VAT Sim, nobody's online right now. So I couldn't just get a VAT Sim controller to be part of this. So let's go ahead and tune Tower and let Tower know we are just about ready to go. So here we are holding short of runway 9. And now we're going to request our takeoff clearance.
St. Paul Tower Cheese 1 at runway 9 are ready for departure IFR to Oshkosh.
One observer, off for 5.35 signal at 8. Cleared, takeoff runway 9er.
All right.
Takeoff runway 9er Cheese 1.
Mixture rich. Props set full forward. Let's go and take the runway. And away we go. Airspeed's alive. It was a gusty takeoff. Let's go ahead and get our gear up. Oh, departure frequency. Let's go back to our scratch pad.
Minneapolis departure on 121 Central Hill.
21-2.
One two one decimal 2 cheese 1. Goodbye.
21-2. And let's contact Minneapolis departure.
Minneapolis departure Cheese 1 is passing 1,900 feet, climbing 9,000 feet.
If the one of these was looking for them and are doing, and the most 7-point radar contact continue.
Continue where?
Minneapolis departure Cheese 1 requesting vector to next waypoint.
She's wonderful. Oh, wait, see you in course.
All right, 105 on course.
Turn right heading 105, resume all navigation Cheese 1.
So let's go down to our nope, that's not what I want to go down to. Ah! Some of these controls are just... There we go. There we go. And now we're going to follow that radial that we had tuned in. I need a little bit more trim. So we're currently at about 6,000 feet, or coming up on 6,000 feet. Currently 23 nautical miles away. So as you can tell, this is how people used to navigate from point A to point B when they didn't have RNAV. I don't have a moving map. You can even look at my iPad. I'm looking at the departure procedure. I'm not using the GPS that's in my iPad to keep track of where I'm at. I know that I just took off runway 9 and I am following along, and I just took off runway 9. They gave me a little bit of a vector and I am pretty much en route heading to taxi right now. I hope y'all can see that. Here, I'll even zoom in so you can see what I'm talking about. I took off and they gave me a right turn to head on course to intercept the radial to head to taxi. And taxi, as you can tell, is 46 DME. And what I'm looking for is this number right there. I'm currently at 25 DME, 25.2 DME from the GPE VOR from Gopher. And once I'm at 46 DME, then I know I'm at taxi. And then from there, we're looking at another, looks like about 20 miles. Ah, God, let me pay attention. Then it looks like we're looking at about almost 20 miles or 61 DME to go to Colt, and then 80 DME to go to Lamprey. And then at Lamprey, we should start picking up Dells.
Minneapolis Center, Delta 2733 Heavy is passing flight level 195, climbing flight level 230. Delta 2733 Heavy, Minneapolis Center, radar contact, continue.
Now, what you might have noticed if you were kind of paying attention during that little sped up section, I actually figured out that this is nav2. So we are using it from the Eclair VOR. And if you see, we've got the Eclair VOR, and it gives me cross radials to help me identify these other fixes. So as you can see, the needle just came off center, letting me know that I just passed Colt. And if I look over at my DME, it shows me that, yeah, I passed Colt about 8 miles ago. So now let's go ahead and set the next one, which is 203. So I set 210, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That should be 203. And when that needle swings in again, that's letting me know that I've gotten to Lamprey. So as you can tell, old navigation was difficult. It was a little bit, some people might view it more as a purist level of navigation. You know, you don't have all these screens yelling at you and whatnot.
Contact Minneapolis Center on 134.85. Good day. Delta 2733 heavy traffic is 9 o'clock 4 miles at flight level 195 Airbus A20N. Report them in sight.
134.85 cheese 1. Goodbye. Minneapolis Center cheese 19,100 feet.
Cheese 1 Minneapolis Center altimeter 29.71 radar contact. Continue to LMFRY.
All right. So as you can tell, some people might view this like as a bit more of a purist form of navigation. You know, as I was saying, you don't have all these screens yelling at you. You don't have all these moving maps. You just have to trust your navigation. Right now, as you can tell, there is absolutely no moving map. There is nothing that's directing me with a pictorial description of where I'm at. It's just kind of proof that, like, it is possible to navigate without a moving map. I know people make the joke that, you know, we're the children of the magenta, that all we know how to do is follow an iPad, or all we know how to do is follow a GPS. But hopefully by the end of this video, you realize that you can just load up some VORs and send it and you'll be fine. So I'll meet y'all back when we get closer to Oshkosh. And right there, you see how that needle centered up right there in the middle? So right here in the middle, we could see this needle centered up. I'm on track. That should help me identify this fix right here, Lamprey. And if I look over at my DME, I'm at 80 DME right there. And if I look at Lamprey, 80 DME. It's almost like we planned it that way. Now, what I need to do is put in my next radio, because right there at Lamprey, I should be going to Dells. I should be picking up the Dells VOR. So I'm going to tune in my new radio, swap it on over, and I've picked up the needle. Then I should go ahead and tune in the 296 inbound. And the 296 inbound should give me a 2 indication with 296 on the tail. So there's 295 and there's 296. So 296 is on the tail. I've got a 2 indication that's taking me to my new VOR. I see that I am 98.9 miles away from it. I should be good. I should be en route. All right, now here we are approaching the Oshkosh VOR. We're a little off on altitude, a little off on airspeed, and a little off on course. But what we are doing is we are tracking that Victor 9 into the Oshkosh VOR to get prepared for the Oshkosh VOR runway 18. Now, I know a little bit of an outfit change. These videos sometimes take multiple days, so please, if you enjoy this stuff, if you get some kind of education out of this content, please like, subscribe, follow, hit that bell icon so you get notified every time I try to put out more educational content for y'all. So, approaching the Oshkosh VOR, if we look over on the iPad, we'll see that we even have like our little procedure turn and everything already put on our route, because when we did our flight plan, we made sure to actually put the procedure in the Oshkosh VOR runway 18, just to give us a little bit more situational awareness. So if we go over to our plate, we'll do just a quick little briefing real quick. So we're going to be doing the VOR runway 18 into Oshkosh. Looks like we're going to be hitting the Oshkosh VOR, tracking outbound on the 006 radial. So it should be a 186 course inbound, a 006 course outbound. And after we get about a minute out, we're going to make a left turn to a heading of 321. And then after a minute from there, we're going to make a left turn to a heading of 141 to then re-intercept that radial inbound. And once we're there, we should be able to start tracking down to 1,480, which is our minimums with 1 mile of visibility. If for some reason we don't break out, we can't see the runway, we lose contact with the runway after our missed approach point, we're going to climb left turn to 3,000 to the Oshkosh VOR, radial 111, then to Luco intersection, which is 15.1 DME, and we're going to hold there. We've got a minimum safe altitude around the Oshkosh VOR of 2,700. So for any reason we lose situational awareness, we're just going to hop on up to that altitude. And remember, we did this entire flight plan with no RNAV, no GPS, nothing showing us actively where we were. The only thing we had was our swinging needles right in front of us. And we're lucky to have an HSI. If we didn't have an HSI, this would have been even more difficult. But we are approaching that VOR. Let's go ahead and switch this over to DME. We are almost there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to maintain a heading that should work for us. So let's get this thing on over to heading mode. And then we're going to track the 006 outbound. So there's the 006 outbound. Let's go ahead and change our heading to get us to intercept that outbound. I can slow this airplane down just a smidge. We can even drop our gear at this point. Helps the airplane slow down, helps us keep it under control, makes sure we don't get behind. So it looks like we're coming right back on course. Let's get our heading where it belongs. And at this point, I'll switch it to high sensitivity nav on our autopilot. And we're tracking outbound. I'm looking at my clock. We're already about 2 miles away, so about 30 seconds, and then we should be able to make that left turn. That beeping that you're hearing, that's the autopilot instructing me to trim. A lot of older autopilots that aren't as nice, you're going to notice that they don't have control of the trim, so it's going to beep at you whenever it wants you to control the trim. Now we're making a left turn, heading of 321. And that should be 321. Noting my clock. And then when we turn back inbound, Oh, sorry. Once we get on course inbound, then we can descend from 2,600 down to 1,480. So there's 30 seconds. And it's a pretty gusty day. It's a pretty windy, gusty day down low in Oshkosh. So we're gonna see how well this landing goes. And starting my inbound turn of 141. And then what we're going to do is swap our course around so that we get appropriate sensing. So the inbound course should be 186. So there's 180, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that should swing us back around to the 186 radial. Correction, 006 radial, 186 inbound course. And I should set my heading bug up so that it'll, at the very least, get us close. Oh, sorry. My mistake. I forgot we were still in heading mode. Once we see that needle alive, I'll go ahead and switch to nav mode, and then we'll get our heading to line up with our course, or we could really just use our heading to track down. Airplane's asking for trim up, because we're slowing the aircraft down. And it's wanting more trim up. Let's go ahead and drop a notch of flaps. We're still slowing down. I'm going to add just a smidgen of power. And that needle is alive. Let's switch back to VOR track. High sensitivity, and then get our heading bug to line up. Now, given that this has been kind of gusty, kind of windy, we're going to go autopilot off, and we're going to hand fly the remainder of this approach. We are on course, so I am safe to start my descent down to 1,480. Gears down, another notch of flaps for approach. And I've got the runway in sight already. Last notch of flaps are in. We are ready to land. We're really just visual at this point, flying to the airport. Since I've got all my flaps in, I can only go up to about 125 knots. Not great. Maybe I could have delayed flap and gear deployment until I got closer, but given that, again, it's gusty, it's windy, it's a somewhat of a complicated approach. You know, we're not used to doing VOR approaches very often. There's nothing wrong with getting configured early. Once you start getting into like multi-engine aircraft, it does change it, especially when you start doing single-engine procedures. There are reasons to delay configuration, but given that we're in a single-engine airplane, get configured as soon as you feel it's appropriate. Of course, ATC might ask you a couple questions like, hey, you know, what's taking you so long? Aren't you a Cherokee 250, you know, a Comanche? Shouldn't you be cruising at 160 knots to final approach fix? And then you're going to drop the gear and slip it down the runway so that you can slow down. I'm joking, of course. I don't actually recommend that. But if you need to delay configuration, of course, delay configuration. If you want to get configured early, get configured early. There's no need to race to the scene of the crash. So mixture's full rich, props full forward. We'll go ahead and get our landing lights all on. They are on. And we are ready to land whenever we get there. We still haven't even hit the fix, woman. We're still about a half mile away from that fix. And then the missed approach point is 1.1 away. Correction, the VDP, the visual descent point, is 1.1 miles away from the Oshkosh VOR. And for those of you who are a little confused about what VDP is the visual descent point. It is the point where if you aren't visual by now, you should expect to go missed. And the reason you should expect to go missed if you aren't visual by the VDP is you can't really make a stabilized approach past the VDP at that point. The VDP is 1.1 from the VOR, which it looks like it's 1.3 from the runway. So if I'm only 1.3 miles away from the runway, but I'm 700 feet high on final, there's no way. What am I going to do? Kick the rudder, dump the wing, drop all my drag, and dive for it? That doesn't sound like a very stable approach now, does it? I mean, even this one, wasn't really my best approach. If I'm just going to be honest. Like, I ended up blowing through my final course pretty bad. This really wasn't my best approach, but we're going to make it down safely. We're still just a little left of center line. But to kind of finish all this up, it is fully possible for you to navigate without RNAV. It is completely possible for you to navigate without GPS. But if you are curious about navigating and flight planning with GPS, be on the lookout for another video that I'm going to be doing later. So we've covered a good majority of the nav sources of the ground fixes, the satellite, or not ground fixes, but ground navigation aids, satellite navigation aids, area navigation aids, and now we're really going to get into the flight planning procedures. We talked about planning in this one with only ground-based navigation aids. Next one is going to be RNAV navigation aids, and maybe one day we'll even do like an airliner video where we talk about how that planning works out and how to load everything into the FMS. Let me know if that's something that y'all would want to see. But here we are, last chance, gears down. Oh, we got a little bit of a balloon. Not really my best landing. All right, we're down. Ooh. But I really do appreciate y'all coming along, hanging out, watching me turn that landing into a disaster, and hopefully you learned a thing or two. Let me know if there's anything I didn't cover down in the comments. And as always, keep it cheesy.